He's Google Scholar. You can find his citation, and maximum publication is the Scopus ABDC. And he is having the books of the behavioral finance, the Pearson publications, and he has lots of projects are there. And he also the poem writer. He is having some books also, and lots of books. He's got the bestseller author. So now I'm requesting sir, please. He also my guide as a PhD supervisor. So it's my privilege to request him, sir, to deliver of your technical session. So thank you, sir.
So thank you, Sujit. Thanks for inviting me to this international workshop. And it would be my privilege and honor to present in front of such august audience. I request everyone to kindly switch off your audios because it is creating some noise, some disturbance. Mr. Nimai Charan Das, your audio is on. Kindly switch off, kindly mute your mic. Yes. So the topic that has been given to me is a systematic literature review. So without wasting much time, let me directly come to the topic. Let me share the slides first. Is the screen visible to you?
Sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So this systematic literature review, this word is quite trending nowadays, and very often I find the scholars doing this systematic literature review. I ask them what actually are doing, so doing systematic literature review, something related to literature review. Of course, this literature review is one of the very important part of PhD, and we have been doing this literature review since long. Whenever there was some kind of research we have to do PhD, the first thing that our guide asked us to do some literature review. I was also asked by my guide, many of you have also been asked by your guide to do literature review. But now it is this systematic literature. Now what is systematic? And now the word systematic I heard for the first time by our science teacher when he introduced us the concept of science, the subject called science, and when actually he told us that what is science. So a systematic body of literature is called science. So systematic body of literature, systematic knowledge about anything is science, that is scientific knowledge. So here systematic literature review, in one sense, we'll get to know that this is also one kind of scientific literature review. Now, there are certain misconceptions with respect to this systematic literature review. And what is that misconception? Many of you, those who are the senior people, must have heard in your department with your research scholars, there are certain misconceptions. First one is that review papers are not published generally. This is a misconception among the students that if you are doing only literature review, this is not possible to get the papers published only on the basis of literature review. To some extent, it is correct that only on the basis of literature review, it is not possible to publish any paper, but only on the basis of systematic literature review, it is possible to publish papers. I will show you how. Review papers cannot be written independently and literature review to support some empirical papers. Normally, whenever we are doing some research, doing some empirical study, we are collecting data based on primary sources or secondary sources. So normally one section is there that is called literature review, just to support our hypothesis or to prove or disprove our hypothesis that this is possible, this is not, this is the gap, these are the studies have been conducted. And normally when we do that literature review, we are also falling prey to one bias called confirmatory bias, that we normally pick selectively only those papers which support our hypothesis and reject or ignore all those papers which are actually not at all supporting or contradicting to our hypothesis or research. And that's why only literature review is not actually scientific approach, but systematic literature review is scientific. We'll get to know how. Now, when actually we have to define the term systematic literature review or introduction, what is actually systematic literature review? This is also called structured literature review or scientific literature review. And why it is done? It is done to bring the field closer. Whatever is your field, many of you might be from management discipline. Within the management discipline, you might be from finance, HR, accounting, marketing, uh, and so other areas. Within that also, when actually you just keep on digging the field further and further, you will find something, some topic, but there are some scattered literature on that topic. Suppose someone is doing a study on, say, neuromarketing. Now, within the marketing, so many domains are there. Now, neuromarketing. Now, say there will be so many papers, so many researches on the area called neuromarketing. Now, what actually has been done in neuromarketing? Is there any theoretical framework? Is there any model? Can we develop some model? Can we propose some model? Can we propose some research framework? All these things are possible only when we do literature review, and that proposed model will be scientific if you go by systematic literature review. So the systematic literature is done to bring the field closer. And high quality systematic literature reviews, SLRs, support better decision for the policymakers. Whosoever is the policy maker, because these papers are written not only for the researchers. We are writing these papers not only for us, not only for submitting our PhD thesis or not only for getting it published in some very good journals, but ultimately every paper has some implication. And whenever actually you are writing your paper, at the end of the paper you have to write some policy implications, like how this paper will be useful for the policymakers. Generally, if it is a normal literature review, it is not referred by the policymakers, but if it is systematic literature review, it is referred by the policymakers because of its simplicity. Very technical empirical papers may not be may not be understandable by the policymakers, or that empirical papers have the limitation that they are actually focusing only on one aspect of the decision making. But systematic literature review, actually they are combination of a bunch of papers, so many papers, almost all the papers that have been written in that particular domain. So it is very useful for the policymakers to arrive at any decision. And that's why I will show you that the papers written exclusively on the basis of systematic literature review, they also have this managerial implication section, they also have policy implication section. And synthesize the literature under review. Synthesis, that is like bringing together all the literature under review and to develop some common understanding, underlying understanding about that literature. So that is called synthesize. And the main advantage of SLR are transparency in data collection. That is the biggest advantage. Transparency. Just now I have uttered the word called confirmatory bias. This, whenever actually there is a bias, there cannot be transparency. That we have selectively picked up only those literatures which are actually supporting our hypothesis, or they are supporting our opinion, and we have rejected or ignored other materials. So there is no transparency. But if you go by this structured literature review or systematic literature review, there are every chances that there will be a transparency in the data collection. And it also synthesis that result in a higher level of objectivity and reproducibility. That synthesis is important concept here, and that is the results can be synthesized for the higher level of objectivity, because systematic literature review starts like any other normal empirical papers with objective, and it has the capability of getting reproduced also. Like, what is reproducibility? That you got some paper, it is written in UK. Now, can it be reproduced here? Sometimes. How? Suppose the paper is written in UK in some European context. Now, can it be reproduced here? Like the same paper, the same concept, can it be applied in Indian context? And we can check whether the results are actually matching with the European papers, European context, or the Indian context, or in Indian situation is different than that of the European. So that is actually called reproducibility. So this SLR is a review of existing body of literature. Once again, let us define SLR. So it is a review of existing body of literature. No doubt about it. This is just like any other literature review. This is also a literature review, existing body of literature. And when we utter the word body of literature, we mean everything like journals, books, conference proceedings, book chapters, working papers, everything constitute body of literature. But out of those body of literature, what has to be considered and what need not to be considered or dropped, that depends on the wisdom of the researcher. There will be a lot of things in the body of literature. Books will be there, book chapters will be there, working papers will be there, journal will be there, journal papers. Now, all those materials, all those literatures are not equally important. Some of the literatures has to be given more important, and some of the literatures has to be given lesser important. Which has to be given more, and which has to be given, which literature has to be lesser important, that depends on the wisdom of the researcher. So, SLR is a review of existing body of literature which follows a transparent. Just now we have explained this. Transparency is the key word here. That SLR, systematic literature review, there has to be transparent way and reproducible methodology in searching, assessing its quality and synthesizing it. Okay, so that body of literature, it will follow a transparent and reproducible methodology. That methodology is transparent and reproducible. Of what? In searching and assessing. In searching the literature, assessing the literature about its quality and synthesizing it, that is analyzing it with a higher level of objectivity. Always there has to be objectivity in the systematic literature review. If there is no objectivity, there is no point of doing systematic literature review. Now, why there is a need for reviewing the literature? And this is general. Why there is a need for reviewing the literature? Forget about the systematic literature review. Any literature, because just now we have uttered, I told you that whenever actually we go for doing any kind of research, writing any paper, any project, the first thing that we do is to do literature review. Now question is, why actually there is a need for that? And the need is that aim of literature review is to summarize and integrate the existing knowledge about the topic. Okay, what is the existing knowledge about that topic? Might be we have thought something, then who else have also traveled the same path, that needs to be summarized. Like aeroplane. Aeroplane, we are familiar with this aeroplane. We might have traveled also, many of us have traveled. Who have made the first aeroplane? It is told to us that Wright brothers have invented the first aeroplane. That is also debatable. Some people say that the aeroplane was invented somewhere in Maharashtra in India. Some people have said that it was invented by Wright brothers. But as it is documented in the books, it is the Wright brothers. Now, when actually anyone who is doing this research on aeroplane or aeronautical engineering, why actually he or she has to know about the Wright brothers? Because the first plane that was invented by the Wright brothers, that could fly only for 7 minutes. But does it mean that the Wright brothers were totally failure in their approach? No. That first aeroplane, it could last only for 7 minutes. But it has given a ray of hope to the generation that yes, human being can fly. Okay. So that is, summarize the existing body of knowledge about a topic and then integrate it. Okay, like who has done it for the first time, then what were the developments, gradual developments in that area. That is integration of the existing body of knowledge. That is important. For example, many of us have studied economics. Now, it is debatable that when we have been told or we have been made to believe that Adam Smith is the father of economics. So whenever actually we start reading economics, we start with 1776. 1776, that the year when the Adam Smith have written his first paper on economics, that an inquiry into the wealth, nature and causes of wealth of nations. This is the first paper on economics, and because of that he is called the father of economics. And then we study about the Alfred Marshall, Lionel Robbins, Paul Samuelson, and so forth. And ultimately, we arrive at the present situation. What is the development, the latest development in economics as of now? So when actually we do this literature review, we start with Adam Smith, literature review, definition of economics. We start with Adam Smith, and now we study everyone like right from the Alfred Marshall, Lionel Robbins, Paul Samuelson, and Robert Keynes, David Ricardo, and till date, everyone. So objective is to summarize the existing body of knowledge about a topic, and then we have to find out some linkage, integration in that, and that is for that matter we actually need literature review. A stand-alone review article of the literature for a specific topic, that is also sometimes the need for a literature review, that we would like to have stand-alone review article. Just now at the beginning I told you there is a misconception about literature review, that review papers cannot be published stand-alone. But this is, I told you, this is a misconception. That's why it is called misconception, because review articles can be published as a stand-alone article. And introduction to an empirical paper and foundation for hypothesis. Whenever we write introduction of an empirical paper, the problem definition, the hypothesis formulation, we take the shelter of literature review, like who have done previously and what is the existing knowledge, and based on that existing knowledge what kind of hypothesis can be developed. And the first stage of a bigger research project or dissertation is the literature review. And SLRs are the scientific methodology that allows for the creation of a whole article based on reviewing the literature without collecting empirical data. And they try to answer a research question, usually about the status quo of the field of the research. Now, the last one is the integration of all the above. This SLRs are the specific methodology. So first thing is that systematic literature review is a specific methodology. Just like any other methodology, SLR is also a methodology, and it allows for the creation of a whole article based on reviewing the literature only, without any empirical data, and they try to answer a research question. So like there will be research question in SLR. Okay. Now, what is not systematic literature review? So any review which is which is not systematic literature review, it is actually a traditional review. Like we have been familiar with the traditional review. Normally we are doing in any empirical work, any experimental work, we used to collect some data, we used to refer some earlier journal papers, and that is called traditional review. Now, what is actually difference between the systematic literature review and traditional literature review? So first is the point of difference is identification for the need for a review article. What is the identification? What is the need for a review article? So SLRs only make sense if there is a need for one. If there is a need for having a review article, then only SLRs it makes sense. If there is no need for a review article, there is no need for doing systematic literature review. So anyone who wishes to write a review article only on the basis of systematic literature review, then only there is a need for systematic literature review. Simply for the sake of supporting your hypothesis or disproving or rejecting your hypothesis or proving your hypothesis, traditional literature review is sufficient. And if you don't want to write an exclusive article only on the basis of literature review, there is no need of systematic literature review, because I told you that systematic literature review is a specific methodology. And traditional reviews are part of nearly every publication. those who have published anything, you must be knowing that traditional reviews are part of nearly every publication. Every publication we have one section called literature review. And then the development of a review protocol, like some standards, some benchmarks, some procedures. This is called protocol. So where is the development of a review protocol? So in case of systematic literature review, it is essential for the objectivity of an systematic literature review. Means there has to be a review protocol if it is a systematic literature review. Okay, we'll at the end of this presentation I will just tell you what is that protocol, but there has to be an objectively identified, developed protocol for doing systematic literature review, like uh, which database has to be searched, what are the keywords to be searched, what uh, are the exclusion criteria, inclusion criteria. Everything has to be well defined at the beginning of this systematic literature review. But development of a review protocol, it is not common for traditional reviews. Now, identification of research. Systematic literature review, they are structured, replicable and transparent process. As I told you that systematic literature review, they are the structured, they are replicable and transparent, whereas there is a subjectivity involved in traditional literature review. Evaluating studies in systematic literature review, transparent protocol of eliminated studies, objective process of elimination is there. Which studies has to be considered, like which paper has to be considered and which paper need not to be considered. There has to be a transparent protocol of elimination, objective process of elimination. For example, just to enter certain keywords in Google Scholar or in any database, you will find thousands and thousands of papers. All those thousands of papers are not of our use. So first thing is that Google Scholar is not used, it should not be used for doing systematic literature review. This is one thing, you just take it, that Google Scholar, I get many papers just for the review, and the researchers, they have claimed that they have done this systematic literature review from the Google Scholar. First thing is that Google Scholar, my dear friends, this is not a database. Google Scholar is a search engine. So you have to identify some databases like Scopus database or Web of Science database or ABI Informs database or EBSCOhost database. So in that database, whenever actually you will be entering some keywords, suppose you are doing your research on the neuromarketing. So neuromarketing and some associated keywords, whenever actually you will be entering into database, there will be thousands of papers or hundreds and thousands of papers you will be finding. All those hundreds and thousands of papers are not of our use. So which paper has to be considered and which paper has to be eliminated, that has to be decided on the basis of a transparent protocol. Okay, so there is a very objective process of elimination of all those papers, and so that we'll be eliminating the unnecessary papers, so that we'll be left with only few papers to be studied in detail, and that will be part of our systematic literature review. Now, the process of elimination, what may be the process of elimination? For example, we may decide that we will be considering only journal papers. So this conference proceedings, book chapters and others will be eliminated. So in that way, this will be eliminated. Second, we may decide the criteria that we will be considering only those papers which are written in English language. That is another protocol. So another few papers will be eliminated. Then we may decide that we will be considering only those papers which are published in between 2010 to 2022. That will be last 12 years or 13 years. So again, a few hundred papers will be eliminated. So first thing is that we have to eliminate certain papers on the basis of some well-defined objective criteria. I hope you are getting my points. Then the author takes the literature that helps to support their hypothesis. That is very convenient way of doing literature review in case of traditional literature review. Then data extraction, how the data is extracted. So the general protocol that is decided beforehand, that will be the criteria for extracting the data, and driven by intuition of the authors. The author might be choosing selectively some data, and some data might be ignored by the authors in the same research papers. So that is actually traditional literature review. But suppose you have decided that you will be doing literature review, in case of systematic literature review, that how many papers are written in Indian context, like based on the geography. So that is one protocol. And then suppose you have ultimately using this inclusion exclusion criteria, you have arrived at suppose 90 number of papers or 100 number of papers. Now all those 100 number of papers will be analyzed or processed just to find out how many papers are written in Indian context, how many papers are from China, how many papers are from America, how many papers are from Canada, how many papers are from European Union, how many papers are from Middle East. That is one protocol. We have decided beforehand that one of our table will be like based on the geography. Second, we might be deciding that the sample size, we have a literature review on sample size. So like how many papers have considered a sample size of less than 100, how many papers have taken the sample size of between 100 to 300, 300 to 600, 300 600 and more than that. So that protocols of extracting data are defined beforehand in case of SLR. Okay, then traditional literature review, it is driven by the general intuition of the authors. Then conducting data synthesis, that is analyzing the data. So this is concept driven and central part of SLR. It is not necessarily resembles a summary of existing literature. Regions for SLR: standalone paper. Why actually we are doing SLR? So SLR can be a standalone paper. Independent paper can be there as an SLR. It creates evidence and answers a research question, and to set a literature foundation for an upcoming empirical project as individual paper. And labor cost, in case of systematic literature review, it is very time consuming. Like one of my scholar and us at me are doing this systematic literature review. So one paper, it consumes almost more than 1 year to get published. From writing to publication, almost 1.5 years. So it's very time consuming. On the traditional literature review, they are less time consuming. So this is just a comparison between systematic literature review and traditional literature review. So those who are actually just willing to have a comparison or want to have it, just take the screenshot of this slide. Other I'm going to remove it. I'm going to the next slide, means just take the screenshot of this slide. Next,
Done.
a research question needs to be specified. This is one of the prerequisite of doing systematic literature review. Research question. Like in case of traditional literature review, research questions are not there. But in case of systematic literature review, there has to be a research question. A research question is one of the general difference among the traditional review and SLRs. And the basis to write SLR is the availability of sufficient literature on the subject to justify a synthesis. And literature review on a very narrow niche with only a very limited amount of papers and only very rarely provide new insight or theories. Normally this systematic literature review is done to give us some new insight on a new model or a theory. Okay. And lack of theoretical design as a good and carefully developed SLR have the ability to create new insight in the form of a new theoretical construct. So this is the reason that we do this SLR, because there is a lack of theoretical design in any area. So this, as I told you at the beginning, to develop a research framework, systematic research framework, we normally conduct systematic literature review, so that there will be theoretical design. A good and carefully developed SLR have the ability to create new insight in the form of a new theoretical construct. Now, when SLR is not justified, can we do SLR or systematic literature review for everything, for any concept? The answer is no. So, an SLR should not be conducted if it is not the right methodology to answer the research question. Now, there are many research questions where SLR is not the right methodology. And why it is not right methodology? Because there are not lot of research on that area, and that's why, since there is not many research in that area, means empirical research, so there won't be any logic of doing systematic literature review and finding answer to a research question. In recent research areas where good SLRs are published recently, suppose you are doing a literature review, a systematic literature review on a topic which has been published very recently. Suppose recently one of our paper got published in a journal on a topic called digital payment, digital financial transactions, where we have covered all the publications from 2010 to 2022. Almost all the papers have been considered. So if someone else is also trying to do systematic literature review on digital financial transactions, so there are not many chances that this will be published in good journal, because recently one paper has already been published. However, there might be also be a lack of further knowledge that can be synthesized. Means already there are some research papers which have been published recently on systematic literature review on particular area, but if you feel that there are certain things which needs to be synthesized further, then you can do literature review. But if it is recently published, it is advisable not to go for systematic literature review in that area. However, that is always there, that if you can synthesize something further, you can go for that. And an SLR can be useful tool if existing review lacks a good synthesis. That is, you feel that somebody has done SLR, but the topic or the subject has not been dealt very properly, then you can go for this. Or if the groundbreaking progress has been made in the interim period. Groundbreaking progress means that suppose the paper was published in the year 2022 or 2021, and within 1.5 years, some groundbreaking progress has been made in the interim period. Lot of papers different on the different domain, different ideas are coming. Then you can justify your systematic literature review. Last, systematic literature reviews should also be avoided if the research question that should be answered is not detailed enough, or if it sets the wrong focus. So the research question is not that detailed, or it is giving some wrong focus, then also it should be avoided. Now, what is the contribution of systematic literature review? So the contribution is that many papers with different backgrounds using slightly different terminologies for the same research project or the same terminology for the different object. SLRs can help to overcome this issue by synthesizing the field and creating a common language. Now there are many papers with different backgrounds on the same subject, but they are using the different terminology. For example, recently, just now I have given the example that digital financial transactions. Now some papers have used the word digital payment, some papers have used the online transactions, some papers have used the word online banking, some papers have used the bank digital banking, some papers have used the word digital transactions. So digital financial transactions, digital payment, digital banking, online banking, digital payment, digital banking. There are so many terminologies used. So ultimately we have integrated all those papers written on digital financial transactions, but they have used different terminologies, and we have synthesized all those papers into one paper, and ultimately we tried to synthesize the field by creating a common language. I will just share that paper with you, how actually it is that. Next, the author gains an overview of the most important literature on the topic. as the process of collecting literature is standardized by the author on basis of hit keywords, he can also discover publications from other discipline. Because when we are doing systematic literature review, the word is here hit keywords. I just told you that we have used the keywords digital financial transactions, digital payment, digital banking. So these are the keywords. So these keywords are not necessarily from the management domain only. Some of the key, because we have used these keywords, digital payment, and the journal or the papers can be from IT discipline, can be from the computer science discipline, can be from economics, or it can be from physics also. So it has got the opportunity or ability to discover the publications from the other disciplines, what the people from the other disciplines are doing in a similar area. So that is also giving a more scope for synthesizing our research arena, that what people from other areas, like we from the management domain are looking this problem for one particular perspective, how the same problem have been dealt by the persons of a computer science or the person of an information technology or electronics or physics or economics. So because we are only entering the keywords in the database and we are not restricting that this paper should be only from the management or from computer science and so on. So we have the ability or we have the opportunity to have the perspective from the other discipline. And creation of a knowledge map can also help the author and the other researchers to set a personal research focus and define a niche that enables the development of new research. And the process of systematic review, a bulk of literature constitutes an important quality test for published article. So this is also a quality test for a published article, whether they are actually because you are reviewing a bulk of literature. So which paper is good and which paper is not good, ultimately you are reviewing all the papers. So the papers which you are considering in your paper, in your journal, in your research, and that is actually important quality test. Now coming to the business. Now when actually you are planning the review, the first thing that we start doing literature review is the planning the review. What actually we have to do? So first thing is that identify the need. The topic which you are doing, the topic on which you are researching, is there any need for literature review? Of course, literature review will be there, but is there any need for systematic literature review? You have to identify the need. As I told you that all the topics are not equally researchable for systematic literature review. Okay, so if you think that there can be a systematic literature review, there are certain criteria that there has to be some empirical research on that area, so that your objective is to just synthesize and summarize all the papers, all the researches, all the empirical work, experimental work that has been done in that area. So first thing is that I decide whether there is there is a need for doing that research or not. And how will you do that? Just do some preliminary study, just search in the Google Scholar and some other databases. Just doing some preliminary study, you will be able to find whether there exists sufficient amount of literature on that area or not. So that is, check if there is already an SLR covering the topic being published, or if this is the first of its kind. So if already there is an SLR, means already a paper has been published on systematic literature review, so there is no point of doing the systematic literature review once again. This is another limitation of this systematic literature review, because once somebody has done it, then the topic is almost redundant, like in the first instance. Though I'm not saying that we cannot go for any literature review further, as I told you that if the previous researcher have not dealt with the topic very correctly, or the topic has been very badly treated, then we can go for the systematic literature review. But first thing is that just check there is already paper on that or not. Starting with literature searches on Google Scholar or potential databases that you have to do, And if an SLR exists, that is, already I told you that if an systematic literature review paper exists, and if different questions can be asked, because systematic literature review, always there will be a research question. Okay, so if there is a research question, just think that can, using the same, on the same topic, the same keywords, the same papers, can we answer some different questions? If yes, go for it. Or if the existing research has been carried out very badly, I told you that the researcher tried to do some systematic literature review, but the topic or the research has been done, treated very badly. So that is the first step in doing systematic literature review, is just identify the need. Once the need is identified, then you have to develop a review protocol. My dear friends, now we are actually discussing about the steps of doing systematic literature review. So this is the first step, identify the need. Okay, then once we have identified the need, then we need to develop a review protocol. Now what is protocol? What is protocol? Can anyone answer me? What is protocol?
So certain predefined rules which need to be followed in order to carry out a particular research work.
Exactly. So we have to develop a review protocol. Now the protocol, it outlines the parameter for data search. Okay. So what may be the parameters for data search? The parameters for data search may be the databases, which database will be considered. Now, how many databases are there? How many databases we have the access to? For example, like Web of Science, Scopus, ABI Informs, EBSCOhost. Okay, these are some of the databases. Now, which database will be searching? This is the first parameter we have to decide. Second, how many number of years will be considered? Okay, if the topic that we are dealing with is very recent innovation, so there is no point of searching the database, a very old database, very old literature. So the recent databases, recent literature will be sufficient to define that topic. Okay, but if that topic is of a general nature, then we can consider a very old, very longer time period. So the parameters, one is like the which database, the time period, and then the keywords that we'll be searching. Then fourth, the inclusion criteria, exclusion criteria, how a paper will be selected, which paper will be included in our study, which paper will be excluded from our study. So that will be considered later. These are the 4-5 parameters that we need to identify at the beginning of a research, that is called the protocol outlines. Okay, so this comprehensive protocol deals with the search strings, the databases, the criteria for including or excluding literature, the quality criteria, and so on. The quality criteria, the last one, is very important. How will you decide? Because the previous three are very objective, that will be using these two databases. We will be using this particular criteria, like we'll be considering only the journal papers, only English literature, only English papers, only this time period from this to this, only these are there. But quality criteria, how this quality criteria will be evaluated? So for that, it requires, again, there is here is the subjectivity of the researcher. So most of the quality criteria you will be able to identify just reading the title of the paper and the abstract of the paper, whether that paper is actually meeting your requirement or not. Okay, so if just, and here it is this quality criteria, and that's why it is always advisable, that actually I have included as one of the slide, that it is always advisable to do this literature review in a team, because this quality criteria, their subjectivity is involved. So you might be thinking one paper is a very good paper, or a very, like the paper is of your use, but another person may not be thinking of it. may not be of the same opinion. So always it is advisable to do this systematic literature review in a team so that this quality criteria is met. Then identifying and evaluating the studies. How will you identify the studies and evaluating? So first thing is that you will be using the electronic databases. Nowadays, most of the papers, almost all the papers are available in the electronic databases. Now, one reason why systematic literature reviews are so popular nowadays, the reason is availability of electronic database. Had the same concept would have been taught to us in 2005 or 2006, would it have been possible to do this systematic literature review? Because many of the papers are not electronically available. So since many of the papers are electronically available nowadays in the year 2023, so electronic databases will be used just to identify the studies. Okay. So again, the databases will be the one which I just told you, that ABSCO host or Web of Science or Scopus or ABI Informs, or so many databases are there. So which databases will be there? So that first of all, you have to choose a suitable database. Normally a database which will have the maximum number of studies related to that topic will be preferred. So not a particular database will be preferred for all kind of studies. There are certain databases which are exclusively like used for this storing papers related to a particular discipline, particular domain. For example, PubMed. PubMed is a database which is exclusively for which actually stores most of the papers related to the biology and medical sciences. So if you are doing some study on biology and medical sciences, it is always advisable to use an electronic database of the PubMed. Okay, but Scopus is hosting most of the papers related to the social science and humanities or management. So if you are doing some studies related to the humanities or social science, and you are using the database called PubMed, it will not be meeting your objective. So here it's so that objectively you have to decide which database has to be considered for identifying the studies. So the database has to be chosen as per the need of your study, the topic that you are going to deal with. Okay, for example, once again I repeat that if you are doing some study related to the life science or biology or medical sciences, PubMed would have been the better database than the Scopus. Then another criteria of evaluating the studies will be the peer-reviewed journal articles only. Okay, that when you will be entering the strokes keywords, there will be hundreds and thousands of papers. Then again you have to decide that you will be considering only those studies which are actually peer-reviewed and published in a journal articles, published as a journal articles. It means the studies which are published as book chapter or a conference proceeding will not be considered. However, this is not always the case. For example, you are doing some study where journal articles are not very available, or the study, not many studies have been done. So if you consider only journal articles, there will not be many studies, many articles on that area. In that case, you have to expand your search, so you can consider review papers, conference proceedings or book chapters also. Grey literature. Now what is grey literature? What is grey literature? Can anyone tell me? Like journal articles, they are kindly switch off, kindly mute yourself. Someone has unmuted yourself. Please mute yourself. The organizer, can you please help me in muting the person? Okay. So first thing is that review, then second, the grey literature. So grey literature, it may be conference proceedings, it may be working paper. Hello? Hello?
Yes, sir. You are.
No, but someone has unmuted himself or herself. I don't know.
Yeah, Shujit Devnath, Dr. Shujit Devnath.
So, organizer can mute themselves. So
Shujit Devnath, we can't hear you. Would you like to say anything, Shujit Devnath? Dr.
now fine. So grey literature. So working papers, conference proceedings, they are considered as a grey literature because they are not fully published journal article. They are in the process of becoming a journal article. So should we consider or we should not consider? The answer is yes. The answer is no. Why yes? There may be some papers which are published as a conference proceedings, but they are actually a masterpiece in that area. So if it is of that stature, we can consider. But normally, if there are sufficient number of studies available on a particular topic, we should avoid this grey literature. So literature very suitable for the literature review, but not published in a high rank journal. That is also possible. For example, ranking of journals. How actually we do a ranking of journals? Like in ABDC, A star, A, B, and C. In Scopus, Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4. These are the rankings. There is a journal called Vikalpa, published by Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad. And you might be surprised to know that Vikalpa, they have not applied for any kind of indexing. Nor did they have applied for this ISSN number also, just because they consider themselves that they are not actually in that race. So a literature, if you think that a particular paper is published in that journal, but if you go by the ranking of a journal, it is not of that rank. Okay, so you can think of including those papers, or you can think of otherwise also. Next, often the title alone can reveal whether a study fits the review criteria. The point is, how are you actually identifying or evaluating a study? So once you have identified the set of papers, then the title alone can reveal whether the study fits the review criteria. For example, you have entered the keyword like digital payment. Now digital payment, the papers can be from the physics also, because someone have done done a study like how to develop a payment protocol from the perspective of computer science engineering. Somebody have done the same paper from the perspective of physics, but you are looking at the same topic from the perspective of humanities. So title alone can reveal whether that study will be of your use or not. And then after the title, the next thing is that the abstract. So the abstract can help you further in identifying whether the study is of your use, a study is actually meeting your requirement, study is of a good quality or not. So this title and abstract can help you in identifying and evaluating the studies whether actually they are of your use or not. So when the first reads through the title and this exclusion round, another one can be conducted based on the abstract and the research question the author wants to answer. Then go for the full paper. So first, the title, based on the title you can exclude certain papers. Based on the abstract rating you can exclude certain papers. Then after doing all those things, you have a list of papers which you can go to study in detail. That will be the list of full papers. Or the full paper can also be one criteria, that only those papers will be considered which are the full paper of which is available, because there are many papers the full paper is not available online. In spite of best of our efforts, we are not able to find the full paper. So only the full papers available of our selected database will be considered, and then we'll go for the data extraction. Then next is the data extraction. What actually will be mean by data extraction? So create an extraction sheet at the beginning, and it means the Excel sheet. Just create an Excel sheet. Okay. So in that Excel sheet, you can use so many like the title, the columns like the year of publication, the geographical area covered, the tools used, sample size used, methodology, type of paper, whether it's descriptive, experimental, empirical, or qualitative, quantitative. Okay, so that methodology, the finding of the paper. Normally in literature review, we only go for the finding, but in systematic literature review, along with the finding, what was the methodology, how much was the sample size, what was the mediating variable, what was the dependent variable, independent variable, uh, which statistical tool was used, which geographical area was covered, which was the place that has been covered. All these things will be created, an Excel sheet will be created at the beginning. And to overcome the bias, prevent missing important data, and create a higher level of objectivity, more than one author should conduct the data extraction. Already I told you that the systematic literature review, it should be done in a team so that there is a higher level of objectivity, and it also prevent us from missing some important data, because if only one author is doing, some important data might be missed. So if more than one author is doing, so important data, it is there is the danger that missing important data will not be there. Then all those things has to be converted in tables and figures. Which data has to be converted in tables, which data will be converted in figures, that which data will be more suitably represented through tables, and which data can be more suitably represented through figures, it has to be decided by the researcher. Then data synthesis. It is not only analyze the result of the study, but like synthesizing the study, developing an integrated framework of the study, that is called data synthesis. Okay. So it is not only the results of the study, it is not only about the finding of the study, but it is also about the methodology. Identify the problems and to make comparison with the other studies. And if not, there is high probability that synthesis is biased, as a result from the two studies can be contradicting, and based on the quality of the methodology used. Then ultimately last is the disseminating the review findings. So SLR should be understandable by more than pure experts on the topic. So anyone who is a pure expert in the topic can understand any topic. But SLRs are written for those who are not pure experts, like the general people, common people. They can understand the SLRs. It should be written in that way. So that is how the disseminating of the review. Then about the reviewing team, I already told you that the reviewing team, there should be a team of doing literature review, because one person may be biased, and there is a capacity that only one person can do a literature review to the best of his or her effort and efficiency. So always there is a requirement that it should be done in a team. So a strong team increases the value of a paper, and as the team can be seen as a peer reviewers also. This is the second advantage. Like many of the papers, they pass through the peer review. So if it is a team, so the team members can itself be the peer reviewers for the papers, and the chances that the paper will be accepted will increase, because the team members will themselves will be the pre-reviewers of that papers. So who can be the team? It can be the guide and supervisor. It can be the two scholars and the guides, or it can be anyone. While framing the team, there has to be heterogeneity in the team. Like we should see that there has to be heterogeneity, like by age, by experience, by other, by the domain and everything. There has to be heterogeneity. Then it will be a good team. So balance between more experienced scholars and younger researchers has to be there. So this is actually a team, and interdisciplinary teams to overcome the potential biases. Just now, because we look at a particular thing from one perspective only. Like we are from the management and we will be looking at a problem only from the perspective of our management discipline. But how the people from other discipline like IT and computer science and economics and political science and history are actually looking at the same thing. So if our team members constitute of the people from different age, different disciplines, different domain, then that will be a very good team, and the chances that the paper will be good. And the structure of a review, it is similar to any review article. Number of articles, this is also very important. Very often people ask, like, what should be the maximum number of article or optimum number of article for an SLR? And my dear friends, there is no rule that what should be the number of article. It can be anything based on that protocol. How many number of articles are coming, that will be there. And it also depends on the maturity of the field. If a field is very mature, there are chances that we'll be getting many articles on that area. But if the field is not that mature, the chances are that you will not be getting many articles from that area. So if the field is not mature, the available article is limited, there will be scattered, and then the person who is doing systematic literature review on a less mature field have to do a lot of surfing just to accumulate all those articles. Okay, the review articles are less hypothesis or research question driven. Okay, and in a more mature field, there will be abundance of articles available. They will be easily available, and there will be more review articles with hypothesis and research question driven. So this is the number of articles. It depends like the maturity of the field. If the topic that you are dealing with is not that mature, so the chances are that there will not be many articles available. And in that case, if there are not many review articles, there are not many empirical articles available, in that case, what has to be done? Then you have to take a very crucial decision with respect to inclusion of the grey literature. Remember that grey literature, that working paper or conference proceedings or book chapters. Book chapter is not grey literature, but conference proceedings and working paper. So if not many articles are available, then you have to take a very tough decision whether you should include that grey literature or not. There is no right answer that you should include it. There is no wrong answer that you should not include it. It depends again on the maturity of the researcher and the wisdom of the researcher and the availability of the grey literature, the quality of that grey literature, and you have to define it. So ultimately, finally, if we have to step down, summarize the process of doing systematic literature review, it will be: first is find an area of research of a scholarly interest. This is first. Second, undertake an initial short literature search to gain an overview of the topic. First, identify an area. Then second, initial literature search to gain an overview on the topic. What actually you will be gaining, whether already some SLRs have been done or not, how many papers, how many literature, there is abundance of literature or not. So this understanding you will be developing doing some initial literature review. Find questions in the area of research that can be answered with SLR and define the purpose of your review article. Okay, so define a research question, answer question, map the literature. The review of literature leads to the research question. Create a review and data extraction protocol based on the purpose of your SLR. Excel is useful tool to do that. So create a review, data extraction protocol, as we have discussed that certain protocols will be there, and based on the purpose of your SLR, Excel is a useful tool to do so. Define keywords and search strings. Which keyword you will be using, that has to be defined properly. Get feedback on the search strings so you do not miss any synonyms or relevant literature. Like keywords, the synonyms also has to be taken care of. Like as I told you, that digital financial transaction, digital payment, digital banking, online payment, these are the synonyms used for one particular domain. So while doing that literature search, we have used all the synonyms so that we should not miss any synonyms or any important literature. And for SLR, you need to at least try find every academic source on your topic by using the academic literature database, such as this EBSCO, Business Source Complete, Web of Science, Science Direct, ABI Informs, ProQuest, Jester. These are some of the database, and always use more than one. It is always advisable to use more than one database so that you can have a very broad view on the topic. Once again, I told you at the beginning, do not use Google Scholar for this step of the process. Google Scholar, my dear friends, remember this is not a database. So Google Scholar should not be used for doing systematic literature review. Concentrate on academic journal articles only, since these are the best source because they are the peer reviewed by the other scholars. So if you have multiple good number of papers available, so it is always advisable to concentrate on the journal articles only. If you have to rank the articles in the hierarchy, first priority is always to the journal articles. Second, book chapters from very good publishers. Second, book chapters from not so good publishers. Then third one is the conference proceedings, and the fourth one is the working paper. So always when the good number of literature is available, focus on the journal articles only. Be transparent. Note the date you search for the literature and record the number of articles you found in each database. Next is, if you find a potentially relevant article in your literature search, but to which you do not have access over all used databases in full text, you need to utilize the following possibilities to get this text. ResearchGate, many times the paper is not available on that database, but the researcher, they normally used to upload it on the ResearchGate. Okay, so it is available there. Contact the corresponding author second, like the mail of the author is available on the paper in the abstract also. So contact the corresponding author. Normally authors, they mail it. Check if friends at the other institutions might have the access to that database. So these are the things, like if your article is not available, so ResearchGate, other databases, mailing it to the corresponding author, and the friends from the other institute can help you. So ultimately, but you have to have the full paper. Then check the quality of article found through the journal rankings. So journal ranking is important. As a rule of thumb, like everything from A to C is more acceptable. Use the journal ranking transformation table in the paper to decide which article should be used or not for the SLR. But remember, there are some articles, some papers which are not within the journal ranking. But if the researcher thinks that they are very good article, you can include them in your SLR. But ultimately, you have to justify it. Okay. Then read through abstract to decide if the article can really help to answer the questions. As I told you that reading the title and abstract can help you in deciding whether that paper should be included or it should not be included. So do that. Then extract data into your data extraction form. And what is that data extraction form? It is an Excel form that you have created. Record changes on the data extraction form. Provide a transparent and objective process. Synthesize the data you extracted in the best way. Concentrate on concepts and not authors. You should not do a pure summary of the content. Keep in mind that this section is the reason for most desk rejections. Use tables and figures to synthesize the data. Depending on the time since the literature search in the databases should be searched again for new literature. Suppose you have done the literature search in the year 2021 and you have made a list of papers, and since then you are just analyzing that papers. So from 21 to 23, within these 2 years, maybe some good number of papers might be published. So do that literature search again and update your database. and then write your articles and submit to the target journals. Okay. So